Hello, my name is Tom Wright. I am a volunteer producer at CTN, the cable access television station in Ann Arbor. I have had the honor of working with them for over 10 years. They are now celebrating 50 years of serving our community. Today we are introducing the Ann Arbor Public Schools CMPP Magnet Program videos for broadcast on CTN after a brief hiatus. Thank you for your time and consideration.
I have to say, my name is Paul Schreiber. I'm from Ypsilanti, city of Ypsilanti, Michigan. I'm former mayor of Ypsilanti, and I approve this message. I grew up in St. Clair Shores, which was a bedroom community. What I remember about it was that there were hardly any trees. It was flat. We had rows and rows of ranch houses that were built in the 50s. My parents built the house I grew up in 1 year before I was born. It was kind of boring. That's what, I guess that was the key word for me, was it was kind of a boring neighborhood. So I went to an all-boys Catholic high school, and I got a good education, but I think socially it wasn't a good idea for me. So if I were to do it over again, I would have liked to have gone to a school that had girls in it also. I was friends with almost all the boys in the class, but I wasn't really close friends with anybody. So college was a big social boon for me, so it changed me. It made me more outgoing. I think there's a certain mystique about being mayor, and just to show up in flesh and blood and to show them that anybody can be mayor. If the circumstances are right, but also if you really want to do it. So I had been involved with Eastern with historic preservation, which is a big part of Ypsilanti. Also, I saw the financial issues needed to be addressed, and I'd gone to some city council meetings advocating for the Housing Commission, and I saw how things worked, and I thought I could do a good job. And it's not just being mayor. I mean, if you get involved in your community. When I first moved to Ypsilanti, my wife and I, we had a public housing complex across the fence from us, and there were some crime issues there. I got involved, and I got the neighborhood organized, and we worked with the Housing Commission to improve the conditions there. So eventually that led me to be appointed by the mayor to be on the Housing Commission. There were the tenants. All the tenants wanted to have improved housing. The city council was another one, and when I became mayor, I kind of had support from both of those organizations. There was a lot of rewarding parts. I think the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority and the low-income affordable housing projects come to fruition. That was very heartwarming. But also, just on more personal levels, there would be somebody maybe that I could help out. I also, believe it or not, I had people calling me with ideas how to help government. And they would be people that wouldn't necessarily, maybe their ideas didn't work, but what was heartwarming about it was their heart was in the right place, and they took time out of their day to call. The biggest lesson I've learned in life is to be unassuming, to understand where other people are coming from first before jumping out and taking a position. It always amazes me how somebody who is not very assertive can come up with something very insightful. So I always try to listen to the people who don't talk much. The less people talk, the more I try to listen to them. I guess some of the personal relationships I formed were also enjoyable and rewarding. The mayor really is just the focal point. If somebody wants to do something or has a complaint or maybe has a suggestion, usually they think of the mayor first because it's the most visible person. Yeah, it really depends upon how big the city is. If it's a smaller city, usually there's a city manager, and the city manager runs the day-to-day operations, and the mayor usually is just one person that has one vote on the city council. So the mayor can run the meetings and usually can appoint people to boards and commissions with the consent of council. And I remember when I would walk out, there were kids on our block that would be walking past. And I had one kid, every time he saw me, he'd say, "Are you the mayor?" It's like, you know, kids know what a mayor is, they know what a president is. And it's interesting, it's just a very recognizable title. And there's a lot that goes with that, but not a lot of power. So my advice to you would be to don't waste your energy. If you have energy, go out and use it, do something. If you want to do something, now's the time to do it now, because responsibilities happen, things can happen. So if you have the freedom, take advantage of it.
Almost all of my upbringing has always been against the grain. My father's family came over from Lithuania, Russia, during the Russian Revolution at the beginning of the 1900s. And as he got older, he gave up his Judaism and just called himself Russian for safety reasons. He was very protected because he had to be. He grew up in a country that didn't necessarily accept him, with a religion that wasn't necessarily accepted. You know, he had a hard life. My mom was there to meet us at the door, but yet during the day she was, you know, working with women's right to choose, and she was working with gun violence, and she was working with Head Start, and she was doing all of these things that I benefit from and that she benefits from, you know, that you all benefit from, but she never talked about it. Like, she never was sitting in this chair. Nobody ever talked to these women that were like very much the backbone of women's rights. My mom was one of the few women of her time to have a master's degree in science. My mother was Christian. When they got married, it wasn't a time when people of different religions got married. I grew up in an area that was predominantly Christian, and I looked nothing like the people that lived there. So I was immediately ostracized for the way I looked. My parents were absent because they had their own lives. So I went from getting a lot of attention to both my parents getting ill, and 6th and 7th grade, they became physically handicapped. My dad was blind. He had glaucoma, and then at the same time, he had a heart attack. My mom had late onset of multiple sclerosis. She gradually just declined until her last 7 years of life. So as they became more and more physically disabled, they had this amazing symbiotic relationship where they would like walk down the streets and, you know, they'd be like, "I'm her eyes, I'm her legs," you know, and so this is how they moved as a couple through life. Is my dad helped my mom walk, and my mom helped my dad see. One would be dismissed from the hospital, one would go into the hospital, one would get out of the hospital, one would go into the hospital, you know, so it was just this constant, you know, chaos. 6th grade, as I said, was my hot mess year. I would wake up, I may or may not have gone to school. I spent a solid amount of time not going to school, and may or may not have gone to classes. Started smoking weed in 6th grade, so I spent a lot of time high. I process very differently, and I've had to relearn how to do things. Compensate with dyslexia. I did have the concept as I grew up, because I was supposed to read and because of my parents. I did have the concept that these black things on the page were letters, and these letters clumped together made up words. So I had the basic concept of reading. I needed somebody to let me know that I could do it, that I was smart, that I had a foundation that I was intelligent, but nobody really spent the time to help me learn that I was intelligent. As I got older in high school, I'd act like I was going to school and then get on public transportation and I would take it downtown. And I would go to the University of Pittsburgh and I would sit in college classes. So I would skip school and go to college classes or go to the museum. So this is where I spent my 11th and 12th grade year. I ended up graduating high school, which in itself was kind of remarkable. I ended up going to an alternative college that let me know that there was more to learning than just getting grades and doing what you're told to do and sitting in a class. Steve and I, who's my husband, were the household where many people ended up staying at our house when our kids were growing up. So we were the household that if people didn't have a safe place to go. I've paid taxes for 2 children. I've raised a lot more. But I stay involved because I can stay involved, whereas my parents couldn't stay involved because they were ill at the time in formative years. So I didn't have I literally didn't have anybody. At the end of both of their lives, I brought them from Pittsburgh to Michigan. My children had an opportunity to be around people that one said that they had disabilities and one said they were handicapped. They both used different terminology. My husband, Steve, he is an amazing human being. He's kind, he's gentle, he's loving, he's great with children, he's great with teenagers, so he supports my passion. Educate Youth is in Ypsilanti, Michigan. It's a nonprofit. It's an after-school program, and the program is designed for the mission is high school graduation in 2 years past high school graduation. I wish I had a program like this, and so many people walk in there, and it's like, why didn't this exist when I was growing up? It's what I'm supposed to do. It's it's who I am. I introduce myself as I'm an educator by every cell of my body. Everybody can learn, and working with people to find out how to do that. One thing that I often tell people is find something that you love and don't let people take it away from you. Because there are so many ways that people are going to try to take it away from you. People are going to constantly be potentially giving you the messaging that don't do this road, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, versus if it feels right and if your heart's telling you to do it, do it. And do it. And find those safer people that are going to support you in doing it. And if the first person doesn't support you, then just keep going through your list until you find those safer people that are going to say, yeah, let's go. How can I help you? And that's what we all need, is somebody saying, how can I help you?
Well, I was always a bright kid and setting the curve every year, year after year, and going on to be valedictorian, but in the 60s, the expectations for a woman were not very broad. In my last week of my senior year of college, I ran into a high school classmate, and I said to him, well, what are you going to do next, you know? And he said, well, I haven't decided if I'm going to be a lawyer or a physician. And I said, wow. And I thought to myself, gee, a kid from Fraser High School could be a lawyer or a physician. I never thought about that, you know. So that was kind of the first seed that got planted. And then I decided to go back to school in science because I had been shifted by the culture into education when science was really my passion. And it was the beginning then in the 70s of the feminist movement, and I thought, why am I not following my passion? So I got a second degree, undergraduate degree from Wright State University in science. But during this time, my best friend from high school developed breast cancer, and it was a very horrible and agonizing thing because she found the lump herself, but this OBGYN just blew her off. It's just so mismanaged the whole way. Finally, he sent her to a surgeon. He said, even though this is nothing, I'm going to send you to a surgeon and we'll just take it out. And her treatment continued to be horrible until she died about 3 years later. First thing you learn in medical school, in my day, is that if you listen to the patient, you'll hear the answer. And I did. Always with Linda at the back of my mind, and especially with young women who would come in and have already been dismissed. One young woman who had been dismissed by several physicians as psychosomatic, and so she presented through a friend who had met her and said, I think there's something wrong with this girl. You know, will you take her as a patient? I said, okay. And she's about 25, and I said, so what's going on, you know? And she would have these attacks where she would suddenly feel faint and had to sit down and felt really sick. Well, it sounds like you might be having intermittent atrial fibrillation. I said, that doesn't usually happen in your age group. And I said, we need to put a monitor on you. You're going to wear it for 24 hours and then come back. So she wore it for 24 hours and she came back, and I said, so did it happen while you were wearing this monitor? And she said, no. I said, well, then we have to put it on you again. So we made arrangements to put it on her again, and we did this 3 or 4 times, and finally she had an episode while she was wearing the monitor, and sure enough, intermittent atrial fibrillation. I was never planning to run for office. What happened was I met a man through a program at the hospital, actually, that we had in Cincinnati. And he said to me, Griff McDonald was his name. He's probably still alive and kicking in Ann Arbor. And he said to me, do you think doctors are the only busy people? Come spend a half a day with me. Jaw dropped. So I thought, well, you know, maybe I should start going to city council meetings, because what I was realizing over time was that decisions that were being made were not necessarily being made in the best interest of the community, but they were being made by people who didn't have enough information and were clueless, by people who had a vested interest and were doing something to help a friend or hurt an enemy. So I went to the mastermind and I said, Terry, what are we going to do? I said, should we sue the city? No, Cheryl, no, Cheryl. You just need different people to run for office who believe in the charter, Cheryl. You need to run for mayor, because our council at that time, prior, it was really messed up. And there was no trust, for good reason, because no one was being trustworthy. And so I put a stop to all that. I think I'm most proud of the infrastructure work we did in the city of Ypsilanti. We passed a bond and we raised the water rates. We found out that there were a lot of water leaks, and the streets were being ripped up a lot. So citizens came down to council and said, what are you going to do about all these water leaks? So then we brought the YCUA, the water authority, down. Okay, hold on. I said, what is the average lifespan of a water main? And he said 50 years, without hesitating, 50 years. I said, okay, how many of the water mains in the city of Ypsilanti under our streets are 50 years or older? And he said, all of them. And I said, okay, that settles it. We have to replace all the water mains while we're ripping up all the streets. Yes, I think I'm probably most proud of that because it kind of melds the physician in me with the mayor in me, you know. Protecting the public health going forward, removing all the lead lines. I'd just like to add that whatever your age, your sex, your gender affiliation, your race, if you have a passion to do something, don't let people stand in your way. Don't listen to the naysayers. Listen to the people who love you, who believe in you, and move forward with your dream, whatever it is.
My name is Jose A. Malayang. They call me Joe, as the seventh of 10 children. And my parents were teachers in the public school in Calamba. My first memories was during World War II. When the enemy invaders came to my island, they wanted to create what would be called a normal, and one way of doing that was to open public schools. But my parents refused to collaborate with the enemy. They did not want to help out the invaders. So we ran away from the enemy. We started hiding from them. We moved from what I call barrio to barrio, village to village. We ended up in the forest, in the jungles for the rest of the war, which lasted about 4 or 5 years. News came that the enemy had withdrawn and there was no more active fighting, so we moved to my hometown, which will be our hometown for the rest of our lives. Then my parents were kind of authoritarian, but that was part of our culture. The idea that what your parents want, you do. So when they told all of us 10 kids, everybody go to college, we all went to college. They told me, you take up the ministry. I said, oh no, I don't like the ministry. I wanted to be a lawyer. No, because we have a lawyer in the family. So I ended up in the ministry. You have to have, at that time, required 2 years of college. So then I went to the university called Silliman University, where I finished my degree in theology and became a minister. While there, in my freshman year, I met this young woman. Her name is Benny. We became classmates the following year. She directed a choir on campus, so I would go pick her up after choir practice in the evening. She met my parents when my parents came to visit. My parents objected to the marriage of some of my brothers and sisters to their boyfriends, girlfriends. Not with mine. They really liked my wife. They even arranged the wedding without my knowledge. Benny was home for Christmas to visit her mom and siblings. My parents were vacationing, and my parents went to her town. I didn't know. I was on my island. The next thing I know, they sent me a telegram that said, your wedding is set. What? The following April, we got married. I was still in my senior year in the seminary. We decided to have a child. So she was born a week before my graduation. When we went to my first church, there she was. We had 4 children every other year. I was pastoring a church in the southern part of the Philippines. I was in the greater Manila area for a seminar. There was a discussion about 13 young people from Michigan and Ohio were coming to the Philippines on a Presbyterian church program. And they were supposed to stay in the Manila area, but none of the churches wanted them. And nobody took them until they came to me and said, do you want to host them? And I said, well, my church is busy. We're trying to build a bigger church. but I will ask my church leaders. My church leader said, hey, that's exciting. This was February when we were talking about it. They came in July until the middle of August. They ended up on my lap because these are kids from Rochester. They were kind of rich kids. I coordinated the whole thing. I insisted that they be housed in Filipino homes, not in a hotel or dormitory, which they wanted. I said, no, you stay in Filipino homes so you get to know Filipinos and they get to know you. So I had them for a whole month. At the end of that project, and about the middle of August, their advisor, Reverend Davis from Rochester, Michigan, came to me and said, you want to come to America? I said, no, because my kids were young and I wanted to be with them, and my wife was teaching full-time. But when he went out of my office, and I said no already, he met my wife, and my wife said, well, maybe if Joe can take the whole family, maybe he'll go. And the minister said, sure. And so the whole family was brought to Rochester directly, all 6 of us. So we came in 1970. My daughter might show you a picture of the cup and saucer that the minister left the saucer with us and said, the cup is in Detroit, come and get it. So when we arrived in Detroit, he gave us the cup and said, it's great to see you here. So that's how we came in 1970. When we came to America, we went directly to Rochester, Michigan. So they went to school there. And all 4 of them came to University of Michigan. In my family, my kids, it's a little bit different. Yes, my wife and I had authority in many ways, but for the most part, we just kind of nurtured them and guided them, you know. I would respect what my kids wanted to become. And they've all been very good at what they pursued in college. And that's part of what it means to be, in my mind, immigrant families in America, to contribute positively, productively to society here, in terms not only of the parents doing it, but their children. And I think as a family, as an immigrant family, we've done that. We're doing that to this very day.
Thank you for viewing the Ann Arbor Public Schools CMPP Magnet Program videos.